Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is really exciting. It's our first time having a webinar, and to that end, I'd like you to please bear with us with any technical issues. I think we got it all figured out, but who knows? My name is Danielle Carlton. I'm the Director of Business Development for Chicago Behavioral Hospital. We're pleased to bring this presentation to you in partnership with Mainstay Youth and Family Services, as well as our network of behavioral health facilities in Illinois. Silver Oaks Behavioral Hospital in New Lenox, Chicago Behavioral Hospital in Des Plaines, and Lake Behavioral Hospital in Waukegan. Lake Behavioral Hospital will be opening a brand new facility next week, expanding their services and bringing our regional capacity to nearly 400 beds. All of our hospitals provide inpatient and outpatient treatment for adolescents, adults, and seniors who are experiencing problems related to their mental health and substance use. If you have specific questions about our services or would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to me. At this time, I'd like to introduce Richard Lyon, Executive Director at Mainstay Youth and Family Services.
Thanks, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. As Danielle said, my name is Richard Lyon, and I'm the Director at Mainstay Youth and Family Services. We're a department of Main Township located in Park Ridge, Illinois. Mainstay has been helping to serve the mental health needs of the Main Township community for the past 45 years. Everything we do is free or low cost. We provide affordable counseling and psychiatric services for our residents. Our counseling services are available in English as well as Spanish. We have a number of psychoeducational groups, lots of programs for at-risk youth in the community. And our catchment area consists of those who reside in Main Township. So we cover most of Park Ridge, Des Plaines, parts of Niles, Morton Grove, Glenview, and Rosemont, Illinois. For those of you who would like CEUs for attending today's presentation, we'll be talking about that at the end. And also, for those of you who may be furious note takers, do not feel the need to jot down everything on every single one of Mark's slides. At the end, you'll be taken, at the end of today's webinar, you'll be redirected to a link to fill out a survey. Once you fill out that survey, on the thank you page, you'll be able to download a PDF version of the slides that Mark will be using today. So at this point, I would like to introduce our speaker today, Mark Sanders. Mark is an international speaker, trainer, and consultant in the behavioral health field. His work has reached thousands throughout the United States, Europe, Canada, and the Caribbean and British Isles. Mark has written 5 books which focus on behavioral health. He's been a certified addictions counselor for 34 years, receiving numerous awards from a variety of organizations. He's also had a 30-year career as a university educator and has taught at University of Chicago, Illinois State University, the Illinois School of Professional Psychology, and Loyola University of Chicago School of Social Work. And Mark, welcome to our webinar today.
Yeah, thank you so very much. And I'd like to ask everybody to join me in giving Danielle and Richard and Mainstay Youth and Family Services and Chicago Behavioral Hospital a virtual round of applause for sponsoring our webinar today. So thank you so very much. We're clapping for you. I imagine that some of you on this webinar saw the Summer Olympics in 2008. And those were the Olympics where Michael Phelps won those 8 gold medals in swimming. Held in Beijing, China, they put on quite the show, especially during the opening ceremony. You might remember in the opening ceremony in Beijing, each country had somebody carrying its flag. China had 2 people carrying its flag. One was Yao Ming, a 7'4" basketball player. I imagine some of you know Yao Ming. And the other was a 3rd grade boy, about 3'4". So if you could imagine someone 7'4" standing next to someone 3'4", it was really striking. The story they told about the little boy was that a month before the Olympics, there was an earthquake in the town where he lived. And the boy was buried underneath a pile of people. He fought his way out of the pile, and he rescued 5 of his classmates. And reporters asked him, "What were you thinking?" And the boy said, "I'm a helper." He was a crossing guard for a school. He said, "That's what helpers do. They help." And that's who you are. You all are helpers that are on this webinar. You know, I read a book called Good to Great, and the author says that you can tell what's most important to a society by its tallest buildings. He said 100 years ago, the tallest buildings were churches. Today, the tallest buildings are Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 100 companies. The author said that no society is great just because you have tall buildings and Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 100 companies. You're great when you have great counselors and social workers and nurses and psychologists and psychiatrists. So if you're anywhere near a mirror, I'd like to ask you to look in that mirror and repeat this sentence to yourself as you look at yourself. This is your lucky day. You're staring at greatness. Take a moment, if you would, and just acknowledge yourself and what you do. I was on a plane flying from Arizona to Chicago, and I'm sitting next to a man who had 6 Purple Hearts, a 90-year-old man with 6 Purple Hearts, World War II veteran, the bravest human being I'd ever seen in my life, next to him with these Purple Hearts. And he said, Mark, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a social worker. And I talk to social workers and counselors and case managers and therapists and psychologists. And he told me to tell you, thank you for your service. So on behalf of that brave man, I thank you for your service. And I always like to start these with a story having to do something with recovery. A number of years ago, I was leading a group with these 7 teenage girls. They all had complex trauma, and they were all medicating their trauma with the use of alcohol and other drugs. And between these 7 girls, they had 7 days of recovery. In other words, the only recovery that these girls had was that day. And I heard in the residential facility where they were receiving services, there was a 19-year-old emerging adult, young adult woman in the same building walking around with 3 years of recovery. So I selfishly thought what you would have thought. We need her in this group so that her 3 years of recovery could rub off on them. They had a grand total of 7 days. So I called her therapist and I said, can she be in the group? The therapist says, no, she's doing fine, all by herself. I called the therapist the second time, can she be in the group? No, she's doing fine, all by herself. I called the third time, and maybe there's something magical about 3. Her therapist says, okay, she can be in the group. Turns out she wasn't doing fine. She came to that group and said she was going to relapse that day. Our timing was impeccable. The second group she attended, she says, Mark, I want to be a social worker. I want to help girls. And I said, you can do it, you can do it. You become a social worker, you can help girls. She came back the following week and said that when I said she could be a social worker, she cried all week. She said, Mark, I had 4 therapists before. I told them all I wanted to be a social worker. No one said you could do it except you. And I told her, there's only 2 things that qualify a person to do the work that you do. Either you're an expert, you went to school to study it, or you're a witness, you've lived it. She was living with her parents, and her father would get drunk every night and beat her mother. And they were convinced that one day the father would kill the mother. And so she and her mother fled in the middle of the night, and they moved in with an uncle. Feeling safe for a while, the uncle would sneak into her room and assault her in the middle of the night. She was a witness, she'd lived it. When I said she could be a social worker, she was in community college, majoring in general studies. She quickly declared her major social work. She received an associate's degree in social work. She then went to university and got a bachelor's degree in social work. In March of 2018, after she graduated from undergraduate, she called me to the agency and said, Mark, I have a surprise for you. She showed me a letter. First off, she was wearing a sweatshirt from one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And she showed me a letter where that university honored her with $50,000 in scholarship money. June 15, 2019, I saw her walk across the stage where she received her master's degree in social work. And now she is working in our profession as a social worker. That's why we do the work that we do and why what you do is so important. So we're going to talk about wellness during catastrophic crises like earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and pandemics such as COVID-19. Let us begin. So we all have a view of when we begin to realize that COVID-19 was serious. And for me, that date was March 11th. I had given a speech in Springfield, Illinois, and I'm in my car driving down to southern Carbondale, Illinois, and I'm listening to sports radio. And the announcer said that the NCAA has just canceled March Madness. There will be no champion crowned. And I'm like, they've never canceled March Madness. I began to notice the serious. The very next day, March 12th, I heard on the radio that immediately the price of chicken wings dropped. I don't know if you're aware of this trivia, but Super Bowl Sunday and the 3 weeks of March Madness, Americans eat more chicken wings for those occasions than any other time of the year. The next day, March 12th, the NBA postponed its season, and basketball fans started experiencing withdrawal. So, as a Chicagoan in the last 3 weeks, the last 5 weeks, I've been listening to there's a program on ESPN called The Last Dance about those Chicago Bull championship years. And I've been watching that footage on television of Michael Jordan hitting those game-winning shots, and the announcers talking about how clutch, how courageous Michael Jordan is. My friends on this webinar, I'm much more impressed with the courage of first responders than I am Michael Jordan hitting their game-winning shot. You know, he would take that last shot, but would he be willing to go into a hospital like nurses do every day? Or would he be willing to still perform surgeries like doctors do every day? 4 weeks ago, my neighbors at 8 o'clock p.m., they would go to their balcony or their window and they would just start to scream. And I'm thinking they're losing their mind, they're stir crazy, or I thought about what that philosopher said. You can trace all of our difficulties as human beings to our inability to sit still in a room. I thought they were struggling to deal with COVID-19. As it turns out, they weren't screaming, they were cheering. And they were cheering for first responders. And it made me think about you. Those of you who do mental health work, addictions, you're like first responders too. First off, some of you are going to work every day, demonstrating the courage that nurses are demonstrating. But you're like first responders. Many of you on this webinar have dealt with suicide attempts, actual suicides. Some of you have had to call the family and let them know that their loved one committed suicide. There's some of you on this webinar who deal with opiate overdoses and overdose deaths on a regular basis. Some of you have been in your office doing therapy and clients have had seizures while you were there. You've dealt with homelessness the day before Christmas, psychosis, et cetera, child abuse. You, in my eyes, are a first responder. All right. So then the following week after March Madness was canceled, we started hearing reports of hoarding. Now, if you would have told me 20 years ago that we would have a pandemic and people would hoard, you could not have convinced me that the first thing they would hoard would be toilet paper. We started realizing quickly that there was no hand sanitizer to be found anywhere. There was such a desperation that whiskey companies out of Kentucky and Tennessee started making hand sanitizer. Dermatologists chimed in that once we got hand sanitizer, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are more people who have hand rashes today than any time in recent history because dermatologists say people are not used to washing their hands that frequently, and especially with rubbing alcohol. People started hoarding medication. I heard of people who have the condition called lupus, and someone started a rumor that lupus medication could be effective with COVID-19. People started buying it, and then all of a sudden, there was not enough medication for people who actually needed the medication for lupus. You have not lived until you've gone to your favorite grocery store and see those shelves empty, and you've never seen those shelves empty before. People started hoarding food, and street drug dealers tell us that people have started to hoard alcohol and other drugs during this time. Then we learned that COVID-19 was a worldwide disaster, widespread infections, daily death count increases all over the world, no known vaccine or treatment, businesses and schools closing, the rise in unemployment, healthcare and first responders overwhelmed, an uncertain end date. And that in itself is significant when we don't know when something that's traumatic is going to end. A 24-hour news cycle, and I invite you to join me. I watch no more than 2 hours of news per day because we could be overwhelmed simply by the amount of news that's talking about COVID-19. Not enough ventilators and masks. Communities of color hit hard. Drug use increases. And we also learned that COVID-19 could trigger traumatic stress symptoms. And we'll say more about that later. So imagine that most of you have taken a flight. And every flight I've ever taken, the flight attendant gives a demonstration. And what they always say, in case of an emergency, always put your oxygen mask on first, and then help others put their oxygen mask on next. So before we get deep into our content, I'd like to ask you to take a moment, and you can put your answer in chat, and Richard and Danielle can help me know what you're saying. How have you, during COVID-19, been taking care of yourself? What's been working for you? And you can please put your answer in chat. How have you been taking care of yourself?
We got yoga, daily meditation, walks, new hobbies, nutrition, prayer, exercise, cooking, biking, mindfulness. It's like reading, gardening, staying connected with a family, walking dog, ice cream, somebody said. That's always good.
When all else fails, there's ice cream. That's right. Walking the dog, I heard someone say.
A new puppy, painting walls, cleaning the office, getting a good night's sleep, getting outside with kids and music, writing letters to elderly relatives, cleaning, drinking tea.
This could be a book. Drinking tea, yes.
Puzzles, reconnecting with old friends, home improvement, nap, another good one. Anything outside, vitamins.
So just in the name of time, we won't be able to get to everything, but it sounds like people are doing a range of things to take care of ourselves. All right, so we want to know too, and you can put this answer in chat, what challenges are your clients facing, those that you serve? What are their major challenges during this time?
You got financial isolation, anxiety, stress, banking, boredom, job loss, managing fear, loneliness, getting kids to do homework, not having the technology, homelessness, isolation, childcare, grief and loss, lack of structure, loneliness, isolation, not being tech savvy, food insecurity, relapsing.
I saw abuse float by too.
What'd you say?
Getting along with people, abuse, getting along with people in your household.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to say more about that for sure. Thank you for responding. All right. So on the flip side of all this, people are actually spending more time with people who they love. You know, I've learned how important love is to mental health and how important love is to addictions recovery. I tell stories. So sometimes people stay at the end of my seminars and they share stories with me. So a woman told me the following story. She and her husband had a baby, and she asked him to go home to bring her some clean clothes so that she could wear clean clothes home from the hospital after having the baby. She told me her husband was gone for 2 days. His sister showed up and said when her husband went home, there were men robbing the house. And so he went and got the family gun and held them at gunpoint and called the police. She said that when the police showed up and saw her husband holding the gun, they didn't know if her husband was the good guy or the bad guy. So the police accidentally shot and killed her husband. She told me that she was to receive the largest settlement in Illinois history, wrongful death, police killing her husband. She said, Mark, I was in the courtroom and the judge opened his mouth and the judge said you were received. She said before the judge finished the sentence, there was a woman in the back of the courtroom who stood up and said, wait a minute, Your Honor, he's not her husband. I married him first, we never divorced. You guessed, the second woman received the settlement. Now, the woman who told me that story was a really good probation officer, but she said after she got this news of betrayal, she was so bitter in her heart that she could barely do her job. She felt betrayed by her husband. She said one day she was at home bitter, and there was a ringing at her doorbell. She said there was a 13-year-old girl standing there. And the girl said, the woman who won the settlement is my mother, and the man who you married is my biological father. The girl told her right before her mother received the settlement check, the state went in and did a background check, found out her mother had been receiving public assistance illegally forever, a felony in all 50 states. She said, they put my mother in prison. When she got out of prison, she neglected me. I haven't been going to school. I've been smoking marijuana. Can I live with you? Can I live with you? And she said, against the recommendation of all of her family and friends, she looked at the girl and said, you can live with me. She said, Mark, I mothered this girl. Love brought me back, and it brought her back to her. She's not a college student. So that's the good news. You're quarantined with people who you love. Some people never get a chance to spend time with their family. I read a book and the author said, you're successful not because you make thousands of millions of billions. You're successful when the people that you want to love you actually love you. And love is a verb, it's about time, and COVID is providing that opportunity. Opportunities to go on an extended meditation retreat is provided by COVID-19. Elimination of clutter. I imagine that some of you are throwing things away. You might not have had a chance to eliminate clutter in years, and now you have an opportunity. Some pets we hear are happier. One of my friends told me that all 5 adults are at home, and teenagers are at home now, and the dog is getting more hugs than ever. The dog is happier. Telehealth is accelerating throughout the country. Some people are becoming more creative. And just think about this for a moment. I don't know about you, but as a licensed professional, I've been receiving invitations to 5 to 7 webinars every day. We can get smarter during this time. This is also an opportunity for growth. Here's what I read. In 1665, the University of Cambridge temporarily closed due to the bubonic plague. Sir Isaac Newton had to work from home. He was quarantined because of the plague, and he used that time to develop calculus and the theory of gravity. Some of you on this call are going to invent something really amazing that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to develop had this not occurred. And I also have another thought for you. See, I was sleeping through a revolution. I don't know about you. I missed this. I was so busy doing paperwork that I missed this. The world was changing before COVID-19. Think about it. Amazon took over the book industry without owning one bookstore. Uber took over the cab industry without owning one car. And we also know that Netflix took over the movie industry without owning one movie theater. The world has been changing around us, and a lot of that change has to do with this computer technology. I know for a fact that if we offered this as a regular seminar, and we had as many people on here, I think 900 and something people signed up, it would take like thousands of dollars in order to do a live seminar with thousands of people. So the world is changing. It'll never be the same. But my question for you to think about is, do you want to watch and wait for what happens, or do you want to help to shape that future based upon opportunities that are coming out of these times we're living in right now? All right. So Bessel van der Kolk, one of the preeminent authorities on trauma, said that COVID-19 is a pre-traumatic condition, and the people most vulnerable to the impact of COVID-19 are people who have histories of trauma before COVID-19. And our clients, and for several reasons. One is that COVID-19, there's a lack of predictability. Every day we hear something new on the news. And I don't know about you, but I grew up living with active alcoholism and domestic violence as a kid. And it was always unpredictable. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. And some of our clients are affected to this day by COVID-19 because of the lack of predictability. So the recommendation is for us and our clients is to create a schedule to bring more predictability in our lives, having a consistent wake time and sleep time, a breakfast time, work and lunch. The greatest gift I've given to myself, I don't know about you, but I was reading in a book, and they talked about the value of getting up in the morning and doing nothing as long as you can. Just do nothing. And I'm going to suggest to you, usually I have about 15 to 30 minutes, occasionally 45 minutes, depending upon how early I wake up, to do nothing at all, but sort of savor the moment, look around. And that's been the best thing that I've done for my spirit. COVID-19 also has led to some immobility. Some people haven't gone outside for days and weeks. The research on trauma says that when we feel immobile, we either are ready to fight or flight. Thus, domestic violence is increased because people are fighting more within the home. We recommend to our clients and ourselves that we don't fight, but we deal with the stress caused by COVID-19 by getting moving, getting up, and moving around and doing some yoga, and putting those steps in, even where we live. And then, of course, there's this human connections that we all need. The literature says it's unnatural to be locked up. However, as much as I talked about earlier how important it is to be quarantined or isolated with people you love, what if you're not getting along with them? What if you're not getting along with them? I'm getting more calls from former clients. I used to do a lot of couple therapy. It says that they could stay with each other when they weren't quarantined together. But now that they're together 24/7, 365, all the problems in their relationship are escalating. And we're quarreling and we're fighting more and more and more. You know what I learned? is one of the reasons why the divorce rate is so high. It's because most people don't understand marriage. And because they don't understand marriage, now it's particularly rough that they're quarantined at the same time. So I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago, the Salvation Army asked me to do a retreat on marriage. And I started researching marriage, and I realized I had been married for 34 years and knew nothing about marriage until I did that seminar for the Salvation Army. So I've been talking with clients on the phone about the stages of a marriage. So if you have a pen, work along with me. Marriages occur in 5 stages. And the first stage is called the honeymoon stage. You know, it's when you first get together, you first marry, and it's like you're on a honeymoon, you're floating on a cloud. Whenever you talk to the person on the phone, you can hear violin music in the background. The catch is nobody can hear that music but the two of you. You can see no faults in the other person. You're not even a phone person, but you can talk to that person for hours, and hours feel like minutes. They're perfect from your perspective. Quick question. How long does that honeymoon phase last? We call that romantic love. How long does it last? Put your answer, if you would, in chat. We want to know what's on your mind. How long does that period last? And what are you seeing, Richard, Danielle?
We got 3 months, 4 months, a year, a couple of years, 6 months to a year, 2 years, less than a year.
Yeah, so the research says that the longest that period lasts is 1 year. So the next period is called the disillusionment stage. The honeymoon is wore off, romance, some of it is worn off, and you start seeing that person's humanity, their faults, and you start making statements like, you know, those shoes won't put themselves in the closet by themselves. You know, that dish won't wash itself. You start seeing their faults. You know, they don't know how to balance a checkbook, etc. They never feed the cat. They never walk the dog. You start seeing who they really are. We call that phase disillusionment. The third phase is called, one of us has got to change. And guess what? It's you. So you spend these years trying to change each other and fighting and battling with each other. Ironically, it's in the second and third stage where most couples divorce. The fourth stage is called we're a great couple. We're in a good relationship. Basically, what you've now learned is that you can't change the other and they can't change you. So you start accepting each other for who you are. And then, of course, that last stage, and I've named this stage myself. It's called soulmates. So you know how when people first get married, the minister says you're now soulmates. I would argue that you don't even know that person. You just married their representative. Now you're going to discover who they are. I heard a 90-year-old man give a speech. And he said that his wife was the most beautiful woman in the world. And she was in the audience when he gave the speech. He received an award. And if you would have looked at her, even her wrinkles had wrinkles. What I realized is that he wasn't talking about her physical form. He was married to her soul. Most couples don't really understand marriage from my clinical perspective, and so they stay in that second and third stage, and now they're quarantined together. People often ask me, how do I know whether or not a relationship is healthy or not? So I actually talk with people a lot now about the difference between unhealthy and healthy relationships. Those that are unhealthy, that's a lot of drama, there's smothering, a lot of jealousy, a lot of obsession, abuse, poor boundaries. And if ever there was a time when we needed a little space, it's right now when we're quarantined together. Unfair fighting, we're not talking about fist fighting. We're talking about arguing. Fair arguing would be like about one thing at a time and in the present. You've seen couples. I don't like what you said to me last night. I don't like what you said to me last week. I don't like what you said to me last month. I don't like what you said to me last year. I don't like what you said to me February 3rd, 1955. You're like loading up with ammunition from the past to fight. Those that are healthy, each individual is whole. They're growing and encouraging the other to grow. They each have a separate life outside of the relationship. They're able to spend time alone. There was a poem written 400 years ago. I'll share with you the poem. You share with me the meaning of its translation. Here we go. If I am who I am because you are who you are, and you are who you are because I am who I am, then I am not who I am, and you are not who you are. I'll repeat it. If I am who I am because you are who you are, and you are who you are because I am who I am, then I am not who I am, and you are not who you are. Here's a healthier version of that same poem. If I am who I am because I am who I am, and you are who you are because you are who you are, then you are who you are, and I am who I am. You are whole, and I am whole, and now we each can live in our own body, in our own space, and we don't need the other person to make us whole. There's a famous saying that you can only live with someone if you know that you can live without them. And the one way that you know that you can live without someone is to feel comfortable being alone, spending time in your own space. Healthy boundaries, no abuse, and of course we mentioned earlier, fair fighting. So I've been recommending to lots of couples who told me that in the past they were too busy to do couples therapy. Now is the perfect time because everybody has a little bit more time off. And during this time, we even have more ways in which our clients and us can do therapy, Skype, Zoom, on the phone, etc. And then be in contact with friends. How important is that during COVID-19? Incredible story that goes back to a number of years ago. There was an American soldier from Afghanistan. She was stationed in Afghanistan, and she flew back to New Jersey to get married. And she flew back to Afghanistan, and she lost her hand in battle. Her best friends in the military went back on the battlefield and found her hand so they can give her back that wedding band that was lodged on that finger. Where would we be without friends? And of course, there are many people who are saying they're even more isolated from their friends. Those of you who do mental health work, you are familiar with the clubhouse model. And there's some clients with severe mental illness who haven't been in the clubhouse in 6-8 weeks. So let's talk for a moment about maintaining friendship during COVID-19. I looked at an article in Men's Health that says that when men don't have contact with male friends, that can do as much damage to our health as smoking a pack of cigarettes per day or drinking a pint of liquor per day. Think about what I just said. There are a lot of men whose health is impacted by not having contact with male friends. Once I read that study, you know, me and my buddies, and we're up there in age, we've been going to like 2 White Sox baseball games a year. The Cubs are expensive. And we've been going to 1 minor league game per year. So what are we doing now during COVID-19? Every Sunday, we have a Zoom baseball meeting. And we just simply talk sports. You know, next to like savoring and just taking things in, being on those Zoom baseball discussions with my friends is one of the greatest things. Some of us are actually in position to contact some of our friends from high school and college and elementary school, middle school, that we haven't had a chance to talk to in years because we're so busy outside of the home. Now there's an opportunity. So, Dr. Phil. How did Dr. Phil get in Oprah's inner circle? You're a better therapist than Dr. Phil. There's an answer. When Oprah was being sued by the Texas ranchers, he was on her legal team, and he told her to get over herself. And Oprah said she needed people in her life like Dr. Phil that would tell her the truth, that she was surrounded by too many yes people. So a few years ago, I was watching a Dr. Phil show, and he was talking about women and stress. And there was an expert on from UCLA that said that when the whole concept of the fight-flight response, where you start sweating and your breathing becomes more shallow, the doctor from UCLA said that's about men and stress. Those studies were done on men. She said that when women experience stress, they might experience fight-flight, but also it leads to 2 types of behavior. Tending behavior, that is caring for those that they love, and befriending behavior, and spending time with their female friends. And she too went on to state that when women don't have contact with their female friends, they too can get physically sick. So I've been doing my research. And the research says that every woman needs 7 types of friends, usually female friends. One friend that she's so comfortable with that she doesn't care how she looks when she's around this friend. She can curse and swear around this friend. She is very comfortable with this friend. An article I read says every woman also needs an older, wise woman in her life that she can learn from. But every woman needs to do you remember when, friend? You all might remember Joan Rivers, that her agent went back 50 years. And after Joan Rivers' husband committed suicide, her agent disappeared. And she's called him a do you remember when friend. You know, the person that you can reminisce with and remember when times were easier as opposed to how they are right now? A confidant. Brene Brown says that every woman needs a friend that knows where the body is buried, and she's not telling anybody. A good listener, a friend you can count on in a crisis, and someone who's in the same boat. So if you're a single parent, you need at least one friend that's a single parent. If you are newly married, a friend is newly married. If you're recently divorced, a friend that was recently divorced. Lets us know that we're not alone. So what we're encouraging us and our clients to do during this time is make sure that we have regular contact with our friends. Dr. Pat Love says that everybody needs 3 to 5 friends in our life, people in our life, to have a sense of community, 3 to 5 people. And she raised a bold question. And I'll ask you, is there anything she made a bold statement, Dr. Pat Love. And I'll ask you, is she onto something? So here's the statement. She said that loneliness is at the core of lots of the problems that psychotherapists help clients with. That loneliness is at the core of lots of the problems that we help clients with. Yes or no, you can put your answer in chat. Is she onto something? Is that true? Do a lot of our clients suffer from loneliness?
I have a whole screen of yeses.
And of course, that would make it magnified during this time. So part of our job then is to help clients develop a sense of connection, community, even during social isolation. In a little while, we'll talk more about how to do that. All right, human connections we're talking about. We all need at least one person that we can laugh and cry with and eat meals with. Now's an opportunity. I travel the country asking teenagers how many days per week do they eat dinner with their parents. Your average teenager says that they eat dinner with their parents twice a week. Some of you on this webinar remember a time when kids ate dinner with their family every week. Why is that significant? Here's an opportunity to develop that ritual. The research says that children who eat dinner with their parents twice a week use 3 times more drugs on average than kids who eat dinner with their parents 5 times a week. We have an opportunity to sing together. And of course, a lack of connection increases the risk of heavy drug use and traumatic stress symptoms. So if I ask you where you were September 11, 2001, most of you could provide an answer exactly where you were. But something happened in New York City September 12, 2001, the following day. The drinking in all 5 boroughs in New York increased. So we are establishing a relationship between trauma and heavy drinking. We are buying more liquor now. Did you know that now liquor stores are considered essential businesses? We're buying more liquor post-COVID than we did before COVID-19. Then there's Hurricane Katrina. The research says that people escaping Hurricane Katrina experienced 5 times the rate of post-traumatic stress disorder compared to people escaping September 11. 5 times the rate of PTSD. Does anyone know why people escaping Hurricane Katrina experience more post-traumatic stress disorder than people who escaped September 11th? What's your thought about that? You can put it in chat. You probably remember seeing footage on television of people escaping September 11th. They were running. And Bessel van der Kolk asking where were they running towards? Here was the answer. People who lived in Brooklyn were running towards Brooklyn. People who lived in the Bronx were running towards the Bronx. People who lived in Staten Island were running towards Staten Island. In other words, those escaping September 11th were running towards home. Those escaping Hurricane Katrina could not go back home. They were displaced. And I tracked in a lot of cities where they wound up living, that people told me that there was not enough alcohol on the shelves to hold them. Where there's like that kind of relocation along with trauma, there's an increased risk of post-traumatic stress disorder. So we do lots of animal studies to understand humans, so I'll just share 1 or 2 with you really quickly. So they did this experiment called rat farm out of Canada. And they took these laboratory rats and they isolated them in cages by themselves. 1 rat, 1 cage. And all they had to eat or drink was a sweet tasting morphine. And so research, and then they discovered by accident, the way you get rid of the trauma, they introduced an electric shock to their cage. And the rats discovered by trial and error, the way you get rid of the trauma is to drink this sweet tasting morphine. The researchers wondered what would happen that once they were addicted to the sweet tasting morphine if you eliminated the trauma, the electric shock. And what they learned is that 100% of these rats overdosed and died. Then the researchers wondered what would happen if you took laboratory rats and you put them in a cage with other laboratory rats, but you gave them a lot of space to roam. Not like Chicago public housing where it's too crowded. You give them some space to roam, and then you create a great America-like experience for them where there's a merry-go-round and a swing, a playground, a swimming pool for these rats. And all they have to drink is a sweet-tasting morphine. What would happen once you eliminate the electric shock to trauma? And what the researchers found is in community, none of these rats overdosed, and they drank 5 times less morphine. Community is really important ultimately to recovery. They took these chimpanzees and they put 5 things in their cage: bananas, grapes, water, a solid form of cocaine, and a solid form of heroin. And researchers wanted to know, what do chimpanzees naturally prefer? Number 1, they like bananas. Number 2, grapes. Number 3, water. In fact, chimpanzees seem to leave cocaine and heroin alone. The researchers wondered what would happen if you removed their mother from the caged area, and then you took away their father, and then you took away their siblings and all of their playmates, and they started munching on cocaine and heroin. Here's the deal. There are people as we speak who are spending all the time in the same house with their family who have no connection. It's almost like being thirsty in an ocean or lonely in a crowded room. And so for our clients, we have to help them establish a sense of community. More relapses are occurring today. Incredible story about this flight attendant who developed alcoholism, drinking those little bitty bottles of liquor they used to serve on airplanes. I imagine all of you are familiar with those little bitty bottles of liquor. They were small, but they could get you drunk. And they smelled liquor on her breath. And she was forced into treatment, almost lost her job. And following addictions treatment, the flight attendant took a short flight from Las Vegas to the international airport in Los Angeles. And when she got off the plane, she had an unbelievable urge to have a drink. She looked at her left at Terminal 12 and saw all that liquor. And then she looked to her right and she saw the person holding the microphone. She ran up to the person holding the microphone and said, "Will you make an announcement?" And the announcement was, "Will all the friends of Bill W." And of course, Bill W. is the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. "Please return to Terminal 12. And she said that within 20 minutes, 20 people showed up from all over the world, said they were friends of Bill W. And they held a 20-person AA meeting right there at Terminal 12. The good news is that all the anonymous groups, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Al-Anon, Smart Recovery, Alateen, Alatot, what else? Cocaine Anonymous, they all have these online meetings that we can encourage our clients to access to increase some of that isolation around recovery. So the research says that 50% of Americans say that COVID-19 is impacting their mental health. And what I'd like to ask you is, what's the reason that that's occurring? What's the reasons that COVID-19 is impacting people's mental health? You can put your answer in chat.
Fear, isolation, loss of control, fear, a lot of fear and isolation, stress, anxiety, no end in sight, the unknown, uncertainty, feeling overwhelmed, less distraction.
You know, these are interesting times that, both of my grandfathers, I'll call it my great-grandfather alcoholic, if you were like next to me, on the left side of my face, I have a little dot on my face. I have a little dot on my face. I've had that dot on my face since I was 2 years old. And one day when I was 2 years old, I was left in the care of my grandfather who went to the bar to get something to drink. And he left me on the kitchen floor, and there was a bottle of Drano that didn't have the lid on it. My mother told me that I drank the Drano, and this little bitty dot is caused by my having drank the Drano. I'm from one of those families that starts a story, but they rarely finish the story. You know, when they see kids around, they get really quiet. So over the years, I've been left to fill in the blank. So here's my fantasy. I drank the Drano, and the Drano was bubbling in my system the way Drano does. It made its way to my face, was about to leave dots all over my face. The doctors pumped my stomach and saved my life so I could speak with you today. I have a good friend I went to high school and college with about 6 years ago. Said, Mark, we need to join the health club together. In fact, we're not getting any younger. We're old. Let's take care of our bodies. I said, are you kidding? My body's fine. You know, when I was 2 years old, I swallowed Drano. And the only sign that I swallowed the Drano was a little dot on my face. He asked me $1 million question. He said, the dot's the only sign you swallowed the Drano. He said, how do you know your body's not green inside? Took 2 steps back and said, I do know, but I don't know, but what I do know is I've never been clogged up. There's the good news. So control was always important to me. So for the last 35 years, same phone number. I'm one of the few people who I know that still has AOL in his email address. Same email address for 35 years. Same wife, same block, same neighborhood for 35 years. Control, having no control, living with alcohol as a kid is really important. Then all of a sudden, COVID-19 shows up, and there's a lack of control. And I imagine that many of you work with clients who have histories of trauma. This is traumatic for them because it decreases that feeling of control. Over the last 2 months, I've been involved in talking circles, healing circles with Native Americans. And they're talking about how COVID-19 is really triggering their historical trauma. The Federal Emergency Room Hotline for people experiencing emotional distress reported a 1,000% increase in April. Talkspace has a 65% increase in clients seeking therapy online. Suicide and overdoses increased since COVID-19, and the loss of jobs impacting mental health and increasing substance use. So let's talk for a moment about prevention. You know that before this, telehealth was moving at a snail's pace. Now everybody's doing telehealth, and I hope that you do some advocacy where HIPAA is concerned, post-COVID-19, because we need that wide range of abilities to reach the clients that we're working with. Some clients who go to residential, inpatient, and outpatient services, inpatient services for mental health and addiction, will never follow up outpatient because the travel distance is too far. But with telehealth, we can reach more people. If I ruled the world, every family that you work with would receive from you a link to how to do mental health first aid in the home. And of course, Narcan. I've talked to police officers who were atheists and told me it wasn't until they started administering Narcan and see opiate users rise from the dead that they became believers. I just, the other day, I talked to some workers in a small town in Illinois, and they told me that the police department told them that they've saved 300 lives in the recent future based upon the distribution of Narcan. The good news is in some cities and towns, there are people wearing masks who are still delivering Narcan, saving lives, because now as we speak, people who are addicted to the opiates are more likely to be getting high alone with no one witnessing whether or not they're having an overdose or not. Then, of course, wellness strategies are really important for what we do. So let's talk about wellness strategies. This is an opportunity to practice stillness. Most people haven't had to be still since preschool. And engage in activities that help with recovery and also immune health. You know, the famous psychiatrist, Dr. Alvin Toussaint, said that if he got some catastrophic news, the first thing he would do was go to help 3 people. And then every day, write down 3 reasons to be grateful. So I encourage you to encourage your clients every day to create a gratitude list, to write down the things that they're grateful for that day. And for all of us to make sure that we get practice saying thank you on a regular basis. We now have a chance to think about the people who've harmed us. Incredible story about a priest named Father Eddie O'Brien. Father O'Brien was up at 3 o'clock on a Saturday night writing a Sunday morning sermon. There was a knock on the door. Father, there's a man in the hospital who's sick, he's dying. He says he wants to see a priest before he dies. So Father O'Brien made it to the hospital and said, what do you want? They said, you want to see a priest? Sit down. He started telling his story. He lost 3 wives because of his drinking. He lost 5 jobs because of his drinking. Father O'Brien asked him, is there something you'd like to tell a priest before you die? He said, yeah, I'd love to tell you that when I die, I go to hell and God will never forgive me. Finally, he had his say. He said when he was 18 years old, he had a job working on the railroad. This was a simple job. All he had to do was every time a train came through was to push a button so a gate would close, so no cars could come through while the train was coming through. And one day when he was 18 years old, he was so drunk he forgot to push the button, and the train came through and the car came through at the same time, and the train hit the car, killing a husband and wife and their 2 young daughters. Father O'Brien said, I've forgiven you, so I know God will. That was my father, my mother, and my 2 older sisters. Truth of the matter is that we've sent people to outer space. It's one of the hardest things to do, is to forgive those who harmed us. Science says that gratitude, saying thank you on a regular basis, forgiveness, are good for our recovery and good for our immune health. In meditation, I invite you to join me in doing a meditation, and we can start this process by you getting comfortable in your chair, and all that involves is planting your feet firmly on the ground. Get comfortable. And as you get comfortable, take a few seconds to just become aware of your breathing. Just become aware of your breathing. Is it shallow? Is it deep breathing? Is your breathing comfortable? And this meditation is called Love and Kindness Meditation. So eyes closed or looking down, I'd like to ask you to visualize yourself, see your face. And as you look at your own face, would you repeat the following to yourself? May you be happy. You can keep repeating that to yourself. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. May you be loved. Now I invite you to look at the face of someone you love. And as you look at that person's face, I invite you to repeat the following to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. May you be loved. Next, I invite you to see the face of a casual acquaintance. No one you love, but maybe someone who you have contact with periodically. Maybe they work in the Walmart or they're in the cafeteria where you work. You see them sometimes, a casual acquaintance. See their face. And as you look at their face, repeat the following to them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. May you be loved. Next, I'd like to ask you to visualize the face of someone that you have conflict with. You and this person do not get along. And as you look at their face, would you repeat the following? May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. May you be loved. And one more person. Someone whose health you are concerned about during COVID-19. Would you see the face of someone whose health you are concerned about at this time? And as you look at that person's face, would you repeat this to yourself? May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be at peace. May you be loved. If your eyes are closed, I invite you to open your eyes. Two years ago, Hall of Fame basketball player Magic Johnson celebrated the 25th year anniversary of his having been diagnosed with HIV. And if you remember, when Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV, the medication for HIV was so poor that some people would get their diagnosis and they would just die. Magic said 2 years ago, when Cookie told me that she loved me, and Cookie is his wife, and that she would not leave me, I knew that I would survive this. It speaks to the magical power of love. We just want to make sure that we provide whatever support that we can, that our clients can receive the type of love that's good for their mental health. So we've been together close to an hour, and I want to know what we're talking about is making sense. After I'll ask you a question, then I'll talk for another 15 minutes top, and then we'll dialogue with each other, see what questions you have, and then we'll have a big close at the end if that works out okay for you. So what I want you to share in chat is, from your perspective, what's the most important thing that we've talked about thus far? Would you put your response in chat? And I can hear you. I'm just stepping away for a second.
Love the meditation, hope, social connections, self-care, community, forgiveness, friendships, marriage, the importance of staying connected, meditation, self-care, community and forgiveness, staying connected, meditations, gratitude, ways to help others, friendships, understanding what people need to be happy, healthy, and at peace, bonding with family, importance of relationship, love, laughter, forgiveness, keeping a good friendship, loving each other, mindfulness, social connections, gratitude and love, the importance of slowing down, how COVID is related to trauma, mental health.
All right, thank you so very much, Richard. All right, so February 3rd, 1995. February 3rd, 1995 was the scariest and happiest day of my life, all wrapped up in one, if you can imagine, such a day. It was the day my son was born. He came out weighing 5 pounds, 5 ounces, looking exactly like his dad, scared me to death. Let me illustrate what I'm talking about. My son was born with a frame this big, a body this big. He had my nose, my adult nose, on a frame this big. The boy was all nose. So I walked around the hospital room to get different angles. Looked like everywhere I walked, his nose was following me. You would swear his nose had eyes. Then I wondered why nobody ever told me. The second my son was born, I had more love for him than people I know my entire life. So strong was my love for my son that everywhere the nurses took him, I followed him. My fear was that my son would get mixed up with someone else's son, and someone else would wind up bringing a future NBA star home. So I followed him even to the nursery. And most of the babies in the nursery where my son was born were born weighing between 5 to 8 pounds at birth, and they were sleeping in a fetal position like this. There was one baby there in that hospital I never will forget. That baby was born weighing 12 pounds. He was born weighing 12 pounds, sleeping like this, like a grown man, like he's ready to say, give me a pillow, some popcorn, and put the TV on channel 7. We discovered that some babies were too big for the mom, so she had a cesarean section. We brought our son home, and after about 6 months to a year, he learned to smile on a regular basis. And then in about a year later, he learned to laugh. And some mornings as I was headed to work, my son would laugh, and because I loved him, so I'd laugh with him. I always felt better. The catch is nothing was funny. And I felt better laughing when nothing was funny. So I thought I was losing my mind. Then I saw a program on Nightline that talked about the fastest growing movement in India are laughing clinics. There are these people who are clinically depressed. They show up every evening in the town square, and they do 15 minutes of like yoga stretching and then 45 minutes of laughing. And reporters say they sleep better, they eat better, they need less depression medication, their outlook on life is brighter. In short, the research says there's a value in laughing even if nothing is funny. Let your clients know that. And let me suggest this to you. I know your work is stressful. So here's what I'd encourage you to do for the rest of your career. Every evening when you get off work, 6 o'clock, 7, 8, whatever time you get off work, I want you to go to the parking lot. And I want you to get in the car and then lock the door and look around in both directions, make sure nobody's watching, and simply laugh. There's a value in laughing, even if nothing is funny, and it's good for our mental health, our emotional health, etc. All right. My friends sort of email me really funny stuff, like this. A police officer called the station on his radio. I have an interesting case here. An old lady shot her husband for stepping on the floor she just mopped. Have you arrested her yet? Not yet. The floor is still wet. Another activity that's good for immune health is to let people know that we appreciate them. In fact, I got something for you that will blow the mind of your organization. When you get off the webinar, I encourage you to send either an email or a text message to 3 of your coworkers, letting them know that you appreciate them. Love is stronger than fear. As you get comfortable, I have a visualization for you. And again, if you would plant your feet firmly on the ground, you can either close your eyes or look down. We'll only do this for 1 minute. Eyes closed or looking down. I invite you to look at the face of all the people that you love and all the people that love you. And as you look at the face of these individuals who you love and who love you, I want you to visualize yourself hugging each other. See their faces and visualize yourself hugging them, one at a time. You know what's interesting is that, well, first off, somebody said years ago that there's primarily 2 emotions, love and fear, and that love is stronger than or greater than fear. You all don't know this, the majority of you, but 25 years ago, as of May 16th, a few days ago, 25 years ago, I was giving a speech out of the country and got the news from my wife that my first son, at that time, my only child, had died. And I'm in an airport on the other side of the water. And I'm sitting there and I remembered this exercise. So I closed my eyes and I visualized everyone who loved me and everyone who I love. And then I saw me hugging them and them hugging me. And that wasn't enough. I needed a little bit more. So I'm a believer in God. Not everybody is. So I visualized God hugging me. And that was a great relief to me. Someone said it's close to impossible to be as afraid, and COVID-19 has a lot of people afraid, while simultaneously thinking about everybody who you love and everyone that loves you. Hugs are also stronger than fear and love. Wellness during COVID-19, social isolation denies to mean emotional isolation. So we're encouraging each other and our clients to do Zoom lunch meetings with coworkers, lunch with the team as a whole, family reunions, graduations, etc. Use creativity there. People have been doing some amazing things to connect with each other via technology because many things have been canceled. Movement helps. We mentioned earlier Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And he says that the brain can forget some of the details of bad things that happen to us, but the body has a way of remembering. That is why sometimes when you hug someone who has a history of trauma, their whole body will freeze up. So the answer September 11 survivors, what helped you most survive September 11? Those living in New York City. Number 1 answer is acupuncture. Number 2, massage. Number 3 is yoga. Number 4, any kind of movement. Bessel van der Kolk said that any kind of movement can help rewire the traumatized brain in dance. Talk therapy was number 6 on the list. So hopefully when you're connecting with your client via technology, you remind them to do some of it as physical stuff. Let's talk about children. Trauma occurs when we experience situations that are unpredictability and you feel you can do nothing about the situation and you feel unable to take action. We can help children by first encouraging them to wash their hands frequently. Someone said if you have a small child, tell them to wash their hands while singing the ABC song, and by the time they're through, that's 20 seconds. To do some movement, to be active, and to do things so their life becomes more predictable too, while they're quarantined as well. And then it's also suggested that we don't give them unnecessary information that they don't need, which would make them carry stress around COVID-19 unnecessarily. But routines help. So I became curious. What did the astronauts do to deal with isolation? the men and women who went to outer space. So I did the research for you. Scott Kelly, he said when he was in outer space and isolated, he had to follow a schedule of sleep, work, and meals, which is what we've been talking about thus far on our call. And then he also suggested that you pace yourself. Take time for fun activities. So he said when he was in space, he would meet up with crewmates for movie nights, complete with snacks, and they'd binge watch on Game of Thrones twice. COVID-19 has allowed me to watch Game of Thrones. I'm on episode 1 of the 7th season. Had this not occurred, I would not have ever watched the Game of Thrones. I've never seen anything like the Game of Thrones. Scott Kelly also said, get some sunlight. I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I was in the house for so many consecutive days early on in this whole process. We get out more regularly now. One Wednesday, I was saying to people that I was emailing and talking to on the phone, enjoy your weekend. It was Wednesday. I had forgotten the day of the week. Listen to the experts on the news, but not all day. I recommend no more than 2 hours of news per day. Watch the Comedy Channel instead. Pick up a hobby and keep a journal. They say that when we keep journals and we express our feelings via journal, that can provide some of the same benefits that psychotherapy does. John Blaha said, when he was in outer space, first I denied I was isolated in space. I was feeling alone. Then I started missing my family. Then about halfway through the journey, I said to myself, you know what? I'm here. And I'm going to be here for a while. And I'm going to be here for a while longer. Let me try to embrace this and try to make the best of it. I imagine that some of you and your clients have adopted that mindset, that you said to yourself, I'm here for a while and let me try to make the best of it. I decided, I don't know about you, that when my grandkids, if I have grandkids, ask me what I did during this time, I don't want to tell them that I just worried. I want to tell them that I did some things that I always wanted to do. I don't know about you. All right. One astronaut said, when I saw the Earth from outer space, it was about the size of a quarter. When I saw I had an epiphany, a moment of clarity. I realized that all the things we worry about on Earth can be reduced to the size of a quarter. Years ago, Dale Carnegie wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And he told the story of a man who wrote down 8 big problems that he was worried about on a piece of paper. 6 months later, the piece of paper fell on the ground. He looked at the list and realized that none of those things really happened. Dale Carnegie said the great majority of things that we worry about never really happen. But where we damage ourselves is all the time we spend handling it. I have an important question he said will be good for you to ask yourself when you're afraid about something happening in the future, like what would happen if COVID-19, we're still in quarantine in next May, that kind of worry. Dale Carnegie said, when you're faced with catastrophic worry, ask yourself, if the worst happened, could I handle it? And I'm betting on you. Let me tell you why. Because the research says that counselors, case managers, therapists, that you experience, according to John Briere, more trauma in childhood than any other profession. When they've administered the ACEs to different professionals, therapists score the highest than any other profession. But you're so brilliant. What you've done is taken the pain of what you've gone through and turned it into empathy, compassion, and you've made an occupation out of it. You're on purpose. So when it comes to survival, I'm betting on you. And guess what? I'm betting on our clients because many of them have lots of resilience as well. So Peggy Whitson, who spent more days in outer space than any other astronaut, said, remember that COVID-19 gives us a higher purpose, much like being in space does, because we are saving lives by quarantining ourselves. You know, that would be a good message to tell teenagers, because many teenagers are still wanting to party during this time. And it's correct. If they don't have an upper respiratory illness or condition, there's a good chance that they survive it, say, compared to somebody, an adult over 60 that has diabetes. But they ought to consider keeping themselves isolated socially, not emotionally, because they don't want to impact or spread COVID-19 to people who they love, who may be more vulnerable than them. And then, of course, the astronaut Peggy Whitson said, if you're quarantined with others, try to get along with them. It's recommended that no matter how small or large your apartment or house, that everyone who you live with needs to have a space that's just their space, so that if you need alone time, you can get it. So let us pause. And Richard, I want to know, are there any questions? Anybody put any questions in chat or comments? Questions or comments?
Well,
Sometimes people are a little nervous to ask the first question. Who has the second question?
One person posted a question about whether this would be available to watch later. And yes, Mark has generously agreed to have us post a recording of this online afterwards. So we'll email everybody who registered with that link.
Any other questions? Well, then I have a yes or no question for the group. Is anything that we've been talking about, or I've been sharing, is any of this making sense to you? I can't see you. I can't reach your facial expression. Is it making sense? That's a yes or no.
One question we got is many people are struggling with children who have ADHD.
Yes.
And they wanted some strategies to help with that.
Okay, so check this out. Women who were pregnant in New York City, September 11, 2001, their unborn babies were 5 to 7 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADD. And Dr. Gabor Mate, one of the most well-known addictionologists in the world, he's a psychiatrist that has ADD. And he believes that attention deficit disorder is high stress in utero in the first years of life. So he has ADD. So I asked him, what do you do? He says, when I speak, I move. I move when I speak. And he says he swims every day. So we were having dinner with him in Nashville. And basically, we waited for him because he was swimming. I think some of the physical stuff that we talked about earlier to deal with trauma would be some of the same stuff I'd recommend for children who have ADD. I remember once doing some work at an alternative school with lots of kids that were diagnosed with ADD. And physical education was their last pass of the day. So I encouraged them to reverse it, to make it the first class of the day, where they got to use their body early on in the morning and got a little bit tired, and they said it was helping. So I recommend the physical stuff. Is there another question?
Another question we got is, how does one recognize and deal with the reality of isolation?
You know, I think the one thing that comes to my mind is again, I've shared it on several occasions, is that to view it as being in isolation physically. As a matter of fact, really stop using the word of isolation, call it physical isolation. And that we're only isolated physically. But if we have a computer and a phone, then we can communicate with the world. And I also think, I mentioned earlier, like meditation and stillness. This really is an opportunity. There's a reason whenever I do meditation exercise, I only do it for 1 minute, because some people haven't gone inside for so long, it feels uncomfortable. So this really is an opportunity for us to really practice extended meditation retreats. There was psychologists that would go in prison and pay the incarcerated to just do a sitting meditation. And at first they couldn't sit more than 5 minutes. And then they grew it to 10, all the way up to 8 hours. Because when you can get still, then you start to realize that what that philosopher said is perhaps true. Something like what lies behind us and what lies in front of us is nothing compared to what lies within us. So if we can use this time to develop an inner world and inner life and get comfortable being alone, then we'd have given a great gift to ourselves for life.
Mark, we get another question here. How do you help your clients with staying motivated?
Oh, I love that question. So here's the deal. Remember the young woman who I shared with you that she said she wanted to get an MSW, and I said, you can do it, you can do it. You can get an MSW. And then she said she had 4 therapists before and not one said you can get an MSW. So I attended her graduation ceremony. I work at a residential facility where we're able to do that. And she said, Mark, how did you know I could do it? You said, how did you know? Emphatically, how did you know I could do it? And I have an answer for you. I believe that she could do it. Because like many of you on this webinar, I too am a trauma survivor. I'm a child of divorce, a child of domestic violence, a child of alcoholism, etc. I had a child die 25 years ago. So if I survived all of that, of course I can look my clients in the eye and say, you can do it. You can do that because of what I've been doing. So I'm not necessarily taking a position as to whether or not you should share your life story with clients. It's not my position to take. But what I do think as therapists, we ought to remember our own trauma and what we've endured and what we've overcome. Because it's what we've endured and what we've overcome that enables us to really instill confidence in our clients that they can deal with it, that they can overcome it too. Believability. They don't even know why they believe it, but it's because of what we've endured. I like to give clients written exercises like to write down the 4 or 5 biggest obstacles that they've overcome in their life. And they put them on paper. And what that sometimes does is help them put it in perspective. If I overcame all of that, I can handle this. I was doing a training over the weekend with a group of foster parents via Zoom. And what we talked about is how does COVID-19 compare to the other things they've endured? And they said, you know what, I've been through worse than this. This is strange and unusual, but I've been through worse. And if I can handle that, then I can handle this. Is there another question?
We got several questions that came in. One person is asking the name of the book that you referred to at the beginning of the presentation.
And it was by, what was the subject? Do they remember?
Veronica, if you can jump in with clarifying that, that would be helpful. We can move on to another question now. In the meantime, how do I help my spouse who is going to work to a very stressful work situation, who is shutting down at home and disconnecting mentally and emotionally?
Okay. I think there's a value in listening. And if your spouse is not a talker, a value in being there, and a value in asking your spouse what will be most helpful. Some people don't communicate through words. They communicate like through music, through writing, etc. How can I be most supportive of you during this time? Letting them know that you believe in them. I'm also a fan of many of us as men establishing those bonds with our male friends. A friend of mine told a story about years ago. His grandfather owned a farm with pigs and cows and all the animals. It was a real rainy day. And one of his male friends went over to his farm wearing boots, walking through all the slush, just to talk to him. And when the friend left, his wife asked him, what do you want? He said, oh, just man talk, that's all. And sometimes, guys can benefit from talking with each other, just the way women can benefit from talking to each other.
Mark, we got another question here, and I think some of our keen attendees had already answered the question about the book from Good to Great.
Yes.
I believe that was the book that was being referred to. Another question here is, when you are an essential worker, what is your recommendation to have a positive mindset even when you have to go to work every day and risk your life?
Okay. Are there any essential workers? And that's why they're my heroes. They're like military veterans. Are there any essential workers on this webinar? And can you share how you're doing that? Or what's the end of the question, Richard? How they're doing what?
Just how to maintain a positive mindset even when they have to go to work and risk their life every day.
And as those who are essential workers respond to that, I remember what Pat Riley said, the great basketball coach. He said, adversity introduces a man to himself and a woman to herself. We don't know ourselves until we go through some stuff. So I think at a minimum, these essential workers are learning some things about themselves. Are there any responses in chat how people are doing this?
One person said, focusing on why it is that I started in this industry in the first place. Someone else emphasized the importance of PPE, taking care of self-care needs every day, laughter, taking one day at a time, having support from coworkers. Get up at 5 and meditate. This helps me control myself as I cannot control external factors. Movement, prayer, focusing on what I do. I remember my values and think of my kids. debriefing with coworkers, family support, knowing the positive outweighs the negative, team meetings which bring encouragement and identify each other's strengths, acknowledging the difficulties at this time but not dwelling on them, realizing people count on me, remembering that small amounts of beauty that happen all around us, and take time out of the day for you. Use your break, lunch break to disengage and not keep working. Practicing gratitude, focusing on positive outcomes, a Zoom meeting to stay connected, utilizing break time, going for a walk, sitting with kids and laughing, not talking about COVID once you get home, talking with a therapist, and deep breathing.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I think community ultimately helps as well. Talking to some who are going through the same thing at the same time. Let me just move forward real quick. All right, one more. Here's a task that you can do on your own. That's called whole person health. It's to create a list of 3 things you will do in each of these areas. We're physical beings, emotional beings, mental beings, spiritual beings, and social beings. 3 things you'll do in each of these areas to maintain what we call whole person health. So Dr. Mae Jemison, Chicago Public School graduate, first African-American woman, I think, in outer space. I used to work with her father. He was a janitor at an agency called United Charities of Chicago. I said, how'd your daughter become an astronaut? He said, every day in the morning, I told her that I loved her. I thought that was important to tell her that I loved her. And then we'd eat dinner together every night. How many nights a week? Every night we ate dinner together. And I would let her watch her favorite program on television, Star Trek, as long as she did her homework. He said, there was a woman on Star Trek that she really admired named Uhura. Mae Jemison wanted to be Uhura. What she realized years later when she met Uhura is Uhura almost quit the show. She told Mae Jemison that Captain Kirk and Dr. Spock had all the speaking lines. She almost quit. And she talked to Martin Luther King, who told her, don't quit. There are girls watching you who want to be you. And one of those girls was Mae Jemison. So my encouragement to you is to let those who you are surrounded by know that you love them. Eat dinner together, watch Star Trek or whatever your favorite program is, etc. My mentor's mentor was dying, and he called my mentor and asked my mentor if he would fly from Florida, where my mentor lived, to Kalamazoo, Michigan, he said, and sit near my bedside, and help me write one more article before I die. My mentor got on the plane, he flew to Kalamazoo, Michigan, sitting at his mentor's bedside. He said, man, I got to tell you, this is really strange. You've written 500 articles. You have revolutionized behavioral health on your death by writing those 500 articles. Why are you writing this article on your deathbed? This is really strange. My mentor's mentor quoted a philosopher who said that each of us dies twice. He said, the first time you die, it's a physical death. They'll have a funeral for you. And the next time you die is the last time someone on earth speaks your name. And if you keep helping people, yours is the highest of callings. If you keep helping people, there'll be people speaking your name for a long time. This is my email address and my website address. Thank you so very much for allowing me to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you to all of our participants for being here today. It was great to see everybody. If you guys need anything, reach out to us. Richard, I know that you have got some instructions for ending the webinar, so I'll let you do that really quickly.
All right. Thank you, Danielle. Once the webinar is ended, you will be redirected to a page where you can fill out a brief survey. Once you do that, the next page you're taken to will have a link to download all the slides from today's presentation. And then for those of you who are professionals who would like CEUs from Illinois, that second page right after the survey, there's a link on there to click to fill out a form to request CEUs. Those will be emailed to you within 2 weeks, but you do need to fill out that form in order to receive CEUs for today's webinar. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you again, Mark, and we wish you the best Be well, stay safe, and have a great evening.